Well, let's jump in.
Let's do
Daniel
it.
McNair, thank you for joining me on the show today.
Yeah, I'm
And
glad I could.
our friendship goes back many years now, which is crazy to think that.
Yes.
Back to good old UCA days and playing some spike
hmm
ball at Laurel Park. That's what that's what comes to mind. First off the top of my head, game nights at the McNair house were
hmm
always a win as well.
Fun
But
times.
we're talking today about many things. I would love to go so many directions with this conversation, but I think in the spirit of the podcast, my podcast kind of strategic direction, talking about entrepreneurship first and you having this entrepreneurial bent, you've dabbled with it for many years and now have jumped full send into what we were just talking about, your coffee business. And I would love if you could like take us back to a significant moment. I don't know if there's one or a few, but when did you know that you had this entrepreneurial spirit within you that you wanted to pursue? And maybe what was the story behind that?
Yeah. Thinking back, I don't know if there was a specific moment for me. I think I've always had that desire to want to own my own business. And so going back to UCA, the days where we were at UCA, I majored in innovation entrepreneurship, and that really sparked just my desire and the ability to be able to own your own business and what that looks like. And so yeah, it's been a journey over the years, but I don't think there's been a specific moment that really made that like, oh, this is what I want to do.
Tell me about your parents and their journeys in career. Were they entrepreneurial at all? Were there other family influences involved with kind of a stirring of that from an early age, or even just the way that you knew that's what you wanted to study in college? Like, how did you get around to that?
Yeah, it was less my parents. So my mom, she actually went to medical school to be a doctor and went through all her schooling. And when she had her first child, my oldest brother Jonathan, she was like, "Man, I want to stay home. I want to stay home with him, and I don't want to pursue this career." So she ended up having 11 kids and homeschooled all of us and gave up her career as a doctor, which was a surprise to my dad. He worked as a kinesiotherapist. He's retired now for the Veterans Hospital in Little Rock. And so neither of them really had a huge entrepreneurial drive. I say I'd probably get more of it for my older brother, Mark, who has started his own business and has multiple business ventures, but he kind of inspired me. He went to UCA and graduated with a degree in innovation entrepreneurship and kind of followed in his footsteps, going to UCA as well. But I think I just never had thought of myself as just a working at a corporate job and punching the clock, doing the same thing over and over again. I've never pictured myself doing that, and so I think I've always had an idea of doing something different. Entrepreneurship is different. Every day is different, and I think that's exciting to get to work in an environment that it's always changing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you watch Alex Hormozy at all, Daniel? Have we
I
talked
do.
about him? Okay.
Yes,
Did you see this past week his interview with Tony Robbins?
I did. I haven't had a chance to see it yet, but I saw that
Okay.
video that came out.
Okay. Well, it was pretty good, and there was a lot of chatter about it. I felt like on my feeds, a
Yeah,
lot of people who were curious to hear kind of because essentially what happened was Tony sat down with Alex for an interview and ended up being Alex just kind of inviting him to coach him for an hour and
nice.
really uncovering a lot of Alex's core drives and motivations and kind of getting to what I think Tony is all about, which is connecting kind of your heart to your drive, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like what drives you internally and how does that fuel you in business, fuel you in discipline, all these different things that Alex is really known for. He's got the
Yeah.
drive and the mental
Oh, for
part of it
sure.
on lock, right? But there
Yes.
was evidence of him wrestling with, just like this, where does it connect to my heart? Where does it connect to my emotions? These types of things that
Mm.
maybe some of us are struggle more with. Anyway, all this to say, it'd be a good watch. Here I am, yet another influence type person online talking about it. There's like
Yes.
I said, a lot of chatter about it. But one thing that Tony Robbins said that stood out to me about this concept of entrepreneurship is he said he linked entrepreneurship to the American way. And basically said that the fact that not many young people these days are engaging in ownership of businesses, whether that be
Mm.
stocks or the stock market itself, or just starting businesses, owning parts of businesses. He was able to say it so much more eloquently, but basically he was like, that's why we've got a bunch of a young generation who are turning into communists, because one,
Mm,
they don't understand what it's like not to have free enterprise, but they're also not
yeah.
engaged in free enterprise. And the part of the American way that has to do so much with free enterprise, that's what I was raised in so many ways around when it came to my idea of America, was just this opportunity that we have to start
Yes.
things without friction, very freely. You've had a lot of international experience.
Yeah.
It this is a tangent a little bit before we get into some more of your background, but along that line, as we talk about broadly entrepreneurship, how would you respond to that? How does that hit you, especially with your international experience, about the privilege that we have in the United States of America, and how that might compare to other countries of engaging in free enterprise like we do? Did
Yeah.
that ever cross your mind in this whole journey, or how do you think about that in context of national identity?
Yeah. I think that's a big piece of wanting to start up my own business, is just seeing the opportunities that we have and the ability. I think it's interesting because my wife, her mindset is not that way. Her parents are Hispanic. They're both from Mexico, and moved to the U.S. And so she grew up here in the U.S. But she doesn't have that mindset of, oh yeah, we can start a business. You can see an opportunity and go for it. But I've always kind of had that bent to see these opportunities. So it is different to see culturally how it's just different, how you grow up and how your mindset is. But I definitely think it's prevalent. That's interesting. The interview that young people aren't taking advantage of that or have that mindset, especially with AI and the tools that we have now, the access to those, how much easier it is to start a business than it was, say, 10 years ago. So that's interesting because I feel like there's so many opportunities now.
I'm even reading the biography of Benjamin Franklin right now, just kind of
Mm,
as a personal enjoyment thing, and I am shocked by, one, how much I see myself in him,
mm,
as he is kind of a quintessential American
hmm.
figure, a founding father type person, and how many of his like thought processes and ways of approaching the world, whether it be around hard work or some of his ideas around learning and knowledge and growth and progressive, like we can always become better and we can achieve, we can
Yes.
social climb and all these things. It's just so fundamental to the American way and how I was raised just unconsciously. But the other
Yeah.
thing that he is that I don't know that we all give him credit for is he's an entrepreneur. He was an entrepreneur. Like just full stop. That's all he did. I mean, he was an apprentice, I guess, in a print shop for the beginning part of things, but then he started his own, and it didn't even occur to him, and many people back then, I don't think that there was anything different.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm completely digressing. We're going down to a completely different place than I have intended for this episode, which is great. But just another random thought about entrepreneurship there, and how, yeah, I don't know, inherently American in some ways it is as well. So,
Mm,
but it crosses cultures. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to your heart for other cultures and other nations as well, which is going to be really cool. Let's go back though to your journey and your career journey. You started in college with an entrepreneurship innovation degree at
hmm.
UCA. Where did that take you? What has your life's work been kind of summed up over the course of the years so far?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about kind of the different stops along my journey, career wise, and different jobs that I've had. And while I was at UCA working for Chick-fil-A and working as a basketball referee, and really just kind of picking up what I learned in these different jobs of Chick-fil-A. Customer service is very important, and learning that side of the business. As a basketball official, person I worked for had a very high emphasis on professionalism, and yeah, just got to learn different aspects of business and those senses. And then from there, going on a Christian mission trip called the World Race. Just had a heart for missions for a long time, and there's an opportunity to go on a trip to go travel to 11 countries in 11 months. And so I did that right after graduating college, which was an incredible experience, just to get to experience other cultures, different countries, and get to share the gospel to people in need. And so awesome experience from that. Got to do some more mission stuff. That brought me out to Utah. That's where I met my wife, was on this trip. And then from there, working in the accounting field, getting to work with a temp agency there, and work for 5 or 6 different companies and getting to see how they operate, different systems. And it's interesting to see different aspects of companies that I've got to learn about. And I think that's helped my entrepreneurial
Mm.
journey, just to get to see how business operates. and what makes them successful before starting this business. The last job I had was here in Conway, working in sales, which is great experience to have just in general in business, and especially as an entrepreneur, because that typically can be a difficult side of the business is growing the business. And so that was an awesome experience. And so yeah, it's been a journey, and I feel like I've always known I was going to own my own business at some point, but I've kind of bounced around in different jobs. And so it's cool to see how I've gleaned from those experiences.
Totally, totally. Yeah, I'm sure there's been gleanings, in multiple ways. Just one being the practical skills aspect of it, the
Hmm.
exposure, the experience, but then also I'm sure learning about yourself. And that's where I'd
Yeah.
love to. One of the things I'm most passionate about and asking those who I have on the show is, what about your hard wiring? What
Mm.
what do you believe is inherent to you, or gifts of God in your life that allow you to be a good entrepreneur, allow you to be someone who wants to pursue that type of career field? What have you learned about yourself? What would you say?
I would say for me, at all of these different businesses, there's always a limit of what you're able to do within the business. And like you said, a lot of entrepreneurs have that innate ability to want to make things better, and seeing opportunities in how to grow a business or how to make the environment better, the culture better. But there's always a limit when you're not the owner that you can contribute to a business. And so having that ownership mindset to want to improve, to want to get better within a business, I've always had that. And so I've seen that at these different stops along my journey of wanting to make this business better. And thankfully, I've had experiences at companies where they did take accountability in asking the employees, how can we grow? How can we be better? Some of them didn't. They didn't. That wasn't part of their culture. And so I'm grateful to have been part of cultures where they did include the rest of the team, people that are a little bit further down the rung on the ladder to get insight and how to improve. But yeah, for me, I think that's a big thing, is to see opportunities to grow and want to pursue those.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. The ownership mentality. Yeah, I can resonate with that personally as well. So, and it can be friction. There can be friction when there's an ownership mentality in a company that you do not own.
Yes.
And and that's okay, like that's okay. And
Yep.
I think for those of us who have it, we have to uh, take the time to rest in those seasons of growth, and know that, like, our time is coming and our time will come, but sometimes it's not just instantaneous. And so there's an art to honoring those who have gone before as well, and those who might be in leadership over us, while also, not betraying yourself, in that. So I have so many stories of that same thing happening, or that kind of emotional experience, at least as I've gone through the initial stages of things. So, what about your journey has been surprising? Maybe you ended up in a place where you didn't think you would end up. Obviously, I think the end result from what I'm hearing you say is you always
Hmm.
thought you would own a business. Here you are launching, your most recent venture, Kingdom Coffee
Hmm.
Roasters. In that sense, it's where you thought you'd end up. But what are some other surprises that you had along the way, maybe, that stand out as you've gotten to this point?
I think just the timeline of when it would happen. At this point, I'm 30 years old, have two kids, married, kind of settled down. And I think since I've had this drive for a long time, I thought it would have happened sooner than this. But just reflecting on my journey and looking back, I'm really grateful that it has taken this long. And I think for me, believing that it's the Lord and His grace and His timeline that I've got to experience these other things and kind of get to this point, and then how it's happened of acquiring a existing business that was already operating. I guess I just thought that it would be something that I build from scratch from nothing on my own, but that's not how it happened. And we ended up acquiring, and now being a couple months into it, I'm really grateful for that, because I don't have to go through a lot of that work that someone already did. So that saved a lot of time on the front end, so that now we can just jump right in and help grow the business.
Do you think there's a different skill set between people who have to start from the ground up and people who acquire? Like, what are the similarities you see in that versus, yeah, obviously there's a lot of similarities, but how would you compare and contrast those two mentalities in an entrepreneur?
I think for me, all the little details, all the different things, all the steps you have to go through when starting from scratch can kind of bog you down. I thought I was going to be able to do this in the background while I worked a full-time job after getting married and having our first child. But it probably took over 2 years to get to this point, and there was not a lot of traction. And I think it was, different elements of it, of wanting to just jump right in, and maybe some fear of, how this is going to go. But it took a very long time for these little steps and these little things to come into place. But then when we switched to a different strategy to acquire, I feel like it's gone so much faster, having these things in place. And so, um, yeah, I think for people's mindsets that want to have more control of, making sure all these things need to look a certain way, then building the business from scratch and how they want it to be could be good for them. But for me, I think it was helpful to start from a different place of having it be more established, and it's gone a lot quicker now.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I'm grateful for that.
Okay, so for those who don't know you at all, we could have started with this potentially, but just give context about maybe the last 2 years or so. It sounds like it's been
Hmm.
kind of a 2 year journey of this idea, kind of incubating and then kind of working on it and then taking a drastic turn recently. Just a high flyby, what it is, what's going on, and then maybe the steps along the way that you've taken before we move
Yeah,
forward.
for sure. So a couple of years ago, I was on a vision trip in Indonesia and really felt like the Lord was. And I know we're going to get into this in the next segment of the next
Absolutely.
episode, but just a quick overview. But um, in Indonesia, I felt like the Lord was leading and working in business somehow, and coffee's a big thing there. So I got the idea while I was there on this trip to start a coffee business. And coming back to the States, really just jumped into the idea of pursuing this business, went and got certifications in the Specialty Coffee Association and coffee roasting. I bought a small sample roaster and just started roasting at my house. Yeah, started to slowly build the idea of this business and start to put the pieces together. And since then, had two kids, moved across the country, changed careers, bought a house. Lots of things changed, but it had been a slow process and journey, knowing that this is what I was supposed to do and what the Lord was calling me to do, not putting a huge priority on it, and taking the risk of jumping from a stable job to creating a business. And so that has been the last couple years. Ended up going on a trip to Colombia back in September, and on that trip, got to meet with lots of different farmers and learn a lot more about coffee. Felt like the Lord was inviting me to step into this full time. And so coming back from that trip, I told my boss at my job that I'd be quitting at the end of the year. Went part time, and have since jumped into the coffee industry, and acquired a business. So that's,
And
I
that
guess,
I was going to say the acquisition came at what point in the journey? That came, I mean, within the last 6 months or so, correct? Or was it
yes, the
in process
last
before that?
no, 2 months. So
Oh,
that
okay.
was directly after the trip to Colombia. We started talking with a couple different coffee businesses here in Conway, Arkansas. Again, part of the Lord's plan. Someone was a gentleman who's a pastor of a church in Greenbrier, was already discussing with his wife about wanting to sell the business. We just out of the blue cold called or cold texted him and reached out and got a meeting set with him and talked to him about what he was wanting to do with the business and what we were doing, and it just turned out to be a perfect fit in a lot of different ways. And so we were able to take over and acquire the business from him.
What would you say in terms of, if we kind of laser focus in then on your most recent, I mean, 2 years and then
Hmm.
transitioning to the 2 months, of you now going semi full time or semi full time and then full time.
Hmm.
What would you say is one of your biggest challenges that you run into on that journey, particularly around entrepreneurship or anything?
I would say for me, the biggest challenge has been just with some of the current customers, with the transition of, I should have probably gone above and beyond with the communication. There would be a transition with coffee roasting, and it's different. It's difficult because within coffee, it's all very subjective of preferences for coffee. So there was some changes with the transition, and some of the customers were a little bit more difficult and weren't aware that there'd be so many changes within a short period. And I think I could have communicated better on that, with them. And yeah, it was definitely just a bit of a process and establishing new rhythms with the customers.
Sure. Yeah, the continuity. Is it just because like coffee will taste different if you do it differently kind of thing? Is that what where
There's a lot.
I mean the subjective sounds like, oh, this coffee just doesn't taste right kind of stuff, but I
Yes.
I imagine that's just a part of it.
It's just part of the process. Yeah, with coffee and roasting, it's very nuanced, little differences, and so they were definitely used to a certain type of coffee and roasted a certain way, and had a little bit more experience and training with roasting for me going through these schools and then switching over. Yeah, it was just there's going to be challenges that come up,
Hmm.
and that's just part of it. So yeah, dealing with communication, over communicating, and making sure that priorities are met and standards are met on both sides.
Hmm.
And so it's just interesting when working as a small business and small other businesses. Yeah, there's definitely difficulties sometimes when there's not good communication that happens.
Yeah, I get that. What would you say? I'm sure there's a lot of excitement around this new season,
Hmm.
but in general, like what gets you most excited about owning your business, owning a business in general, entrepreneurship, you know?
Yeah, I think it's just exciting the potential where it can go,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
within a normal job, you know, you can get to a certain point and that's about it. But with
Right.
owning your own business, you're like, man, this could go anywhere. And I think
Yes.
especially within the coffee world, there's just so many opportunities to see the business grow and places that it will take you. And so especially with us being so missions driven, I'm really excited to see just the partnerships that are going to happen and the coffee growing countries that we're going to get connected to and start working with. Since I love to travel and meet new people and learn about new cultures. Yeah, getting to start out going to Colombia was just awesome. An awesome way to jumpstart the business. And so I'm excited to see where it goes, where the Lord takes us on this journey.
Yeah, no, that's really neat. That's so cool. It seems like that's a common theme too among entrepreneurs is like the unlimited potential or the
Hmm.
the ceiling that really doesn't exist. There's the non-existent ceiling if you will. At least in our minds, that's what we tell
Yes.
ourselves. And that's the gift of optimism, I suppose, or the gift of
Hmm.
of delusion or naivete as well. But I think it's very common to see that. That's really neat. What if you were to? I really love Simon Sinek's book, Start with Why. Are you familiar
Hmm.
with that book? Okay,
I am.
so you can obviously define that on a business on a whole business side of things, and maybe we'll get there eventually with your business in the next episode. How would you, as an entrepreneur, describe your personal why? Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Like what do you think in terms of impact or whatever? Where would you take that question?
Yeah, I think specifically within this business, having just a passion for coffee, having getting to work within a business where you're passionate, and
Mm,
I'm really grateful to be one of the few people who get to do that because not a lot of people get to work where they're passionate. And so I think one on the coffee side, just getting to work in a field where I'm super passionate and get to really enjoy getting up and going to work every day and getting better at roasting coffee and getting to share that with other people is just awesome. And I'm grateful to be able to do that as my job.
hmm. Yeah, it's really neat. What would you, thinking about your journey, what would you do differently if you would do it, if you did it over again? If you were, talking to a college student now,
Hmm.
what comes to mind is like, just avoid this, don't do this. Obviously, I understand that everyone's journey is unique and that we have to
Yes.
caveat everything with that, but you do have wisdom now on some
Yeah.
level being 30 years old, whereas 18-year-old Daniel did not, have as much.
No.
So,
Yeah. I think it's kind of difficult because of my journey, like, I feel like there was stops along the way that, like, I needed to go through to get to this point. And so I don't know if I would have changed a lot. I think maybe in the last couple of years, just once I knew I was going to start this business, had this idea, I would have started sooner. Obviously, life circumstances and the ability to do that, but I think I would have jumped in a little bit sooner than I am now. But at the same time, I feel like that it's been the Lord's timing and His grace in this that this is the time to go and to start this. He's blessed it so far. So um, yeah, I feel like it's unique for each and every person, but once you know, like, this is what you wanna do and this is where you need to be to go all in and go for it.
burn the ships. Yeah,
Yep,
no, that's
yep.
that's good. That's great. I guess that somewhat is an answer to this last question I have for you regarding kind of the young entrepreneur that might sit in front of you and maybe in college or in
Hmm.
high school, and maybe they're on the edge. They're on the edge of taking that leap. They're trying to reflect. They're trying to think about it. Is there anything else that comes to mind? If there isn't, that's fine. But is there anything else
Yeah.
that comes to mind around advice for someone like that? 18-year-old Daniel, what else would you say from your journey?
I would say failure is okay. You're
Mm,
gonna fail at some point. There's gonna be bumps in the road, but to not let that prevent you and stop you from taking a risk and taking a chance, because you can always stay in a place where you're too afraid to make that failure or make a mistake. But you can learn from those mistakes and you can learn from it, and you're never gonna make a mistake if you never try. So
mm.
yeah, I think it's that of just going for it and learning from the experience of going through that.
Imperfect action. That's something I've been learning about a
Yep.
lot. Is just take the action. Doesn't need to be perfect. You learn through the imperfections of it. That's good. Daniel, I think this will wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for being
Awesome.
on the show. We're going to come back in a week or two with another episode that will talk more about your coffee business and diving more
Awesome.
into what that looks like, purpose driven coffee business. So stay tuned for that, everyone, and appreciate you again.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks for having me on.
absolutely.